terms of production, it is very similar to what we see from stuff like the Centauro. So what's the Type 75 155mm howitzer? It's this Mamba Jamba. Basically, you take a Type 75 chassis, you stick it's not a casemate, I believe it's a full 360 turret, or at least you can see here that it seems to be, and you just add a 155 on it. Now, this sounds really fun, doesn't it? Until you realize that there isn't really a meta vehicle in game which has this sort of firepower without which is able to keep up with the meta. Because generally what you're looking for is reload, a lot of damage, and also, a decent amount of clout. And with this machine, well, you don't have the armor. You may have the speed, the Type 75 chassis, which we see in the form of the, rocket machine. As a premium, has a decent bit of mobility, but the gun just seems way too big. You don't need this size of a gun. What you need is, a decent sized gun with a decent reload rate, and this thing I doubt will have the reload rate. Overall, I can definitely see it being added, and then we can once again have the conversation about artillery pieces and, how they fit in the game. What is the Type 16? Well, it's known as a maneuver combat vehicle, and as you can see, it's very similar to the Centauro. It has what looks like added armor areas around here and here, probably composite or something of the like. It was designed in 2007, so very much modern, and produced in 2015. So this would easily be the most modern vehicle that we have in the game when it comes to War Thunder. It's armed with a 105mm, which can sling everything under the sun, NATO standard, APFSDS, heat, all of that wonderful stuff. So now understand that if this ever gets into the game, the gun would be incredibly similar to, let's say, something like the Centauro or more, or another machine like that. And that's pretty much what this thing is. It's a more boxy version of a Centauro, and I think you could easily add it if you wanted to. The question is this going to save, Japanese top tier? And the problem that's going to happen as we move forward, especially with Japan, is they're going to run out of vehicles to add, right? You've got the Type 10, which is their main MBT right now, along with the Type 90, and then you have the Type 74G, which they still have in service, which is being phased out. Those are your three top-tier tanks, right? So once you add the Type 10, there's not really a lot else to add to the game for Japan. So you've got to complement it with vehicles like this, with vehicles which are also AA vehicles, scouting vehicles, and the like. And I think with the addition of a machine like this, you can do that. It's just, will it be good enough to go up against the hordes of MBTs that are going to be coming from other nations? And that's always going to be, the question. And I think it won't be. It won't be good enough to go against the MBTs, but does that mean it won't be fun? No, I definitely think it will be fun. So yeah, I'm all for both of these being added to the higher echelons of the game, not as premiums though. They need to be standard tech tree. The game already has several Israeli tank modifications, and they're all premium and belong to different nations. Why squander such potential when it's possible to create a full nation with a unique tech tree, including armored vehicles from both the Western and Soviet schools, hybrid designs, and of course its own Merkava line? The answer: the branch requirements for a separate nation are rather specific, and unfortunately the Israeli arsenal does not meet these requirements. It's impossible to make a full research tree of ground forces or aircraft for this nation, so we've chosen... Oh, it's impossible, okay. So we've chosen the current method, which we don't consider to be a waste of potential. Quite the opposite, as players of different nations can try the Israeli tanks. So this, to me, is a acknowledgement that we're not going to get an Israeli tech tree. Now, as I said in the past, I think the best way to add in an Israeli tech tree, if they were going to, was to make it similar to the helicopter tree, where you would have to hit either rank 3 or rank 4 of the US tree in either aircraft or ground forces, and it would unlock the Israeli tree for you to start playing. Now, That was the only way I could think of doing it, since the World War II idea of vehicles obviously wouldn't be around in the Israeli tech tree. Another thing as well, when it comes to it, is the fact that that brings up a whole host of issues when it comes to actually matchmaking and balancing of the game. Because if you have certain nations which don't have aircraft or don't have naval or don't have helicopters, they're going to be at an inherent disadvantage in a lot of the game modes that they play, since they're just not going to have access to mechanics that other nations do. So that's always got to be a consideration. The other thing, when it comes to it, is I actually asked maybe a few weeks ago, maybe a month or two ago, about what are the specific requirements for a tech tree. Because obviously I've been helping a lot, well, not really helping a lot, but, talking to a lot of people about the ideas of, what nations to be put into the game. Obviously, Sweden is one of the front runners. I personally like the idea of Romania and Hungary. Finland is getting up there. And personally, some form of Commonwealth tree would be nice as well. But the main thing is that I was wondering, is there any specific definition of what they're looking for out of a tech tree? And the answer is no. The response that I got, now I won't show the email or anything like that, was there is no public definition of what is required for a tech tree, right? So for me, that seems like everything is up for grabs, as long as it's good enough or as long as it makes as much sense as possible. Now, it seems like BVVD and the other members of the team have decided the Israeli one does not meet those requirements which are held internally. Now, unfortunately, we'll never know what those requirements are. We can spitball, but overall, it is how it is. I would personally like to see an Israeli tech tree instead of them being shared around as premiums, but I understand why they're also doing it like that, especially for machines like the Merkava, using them as event vehicles, because they are really popular vehicles. I did a poll on, the YouTube channel on what are you looking forward to when it comes to this event. And I think around 50% of people said the Merkava. So that's a huge amount, the vast majority of people looking forward to the Merkava compared to the other vehicles, which all got around 30 to 20 or maybe even 5 or 10%. So for me, I can understand why they're doing what they're doing. I just wish that there was some ideas for an Israeli tech tree. The next question is, currently when launching the Tunguska 2S6 anti-aircraft system, the player has to guess at the lead when firing at aircraft. In reality, the 2S6 operators hold the target on the center mark, and the missile itself flies at the target. In this specific in-game feature or a bouncing requirement, will this mechanic be improved? This is a realistic implementation. To calculate the target's impact point, you need both the distance to the target, measured with the target tracking system, and the distance to your missile. Tunguska missiles aren't transponders, and the target tracking system doesn't measure distance to the missile, therefore we use a 3-point guidance algorithm. So it's as simple as that. There's not really much else to say to it. So that's a good explanation of what they are using in the game for the Tunguska. I think there are other questions that need to be asked about the Tunguska, such as what other tech tree equivalents can we have of it, but obviously we'll have to see in the future if those are ever answered. The aircraft ones now. Avenger and Blind Hunt order are often used in RRB to spot the last enemy aircraft. Both orders mark the targets even 20 kilometers away from the enemy. Do you have plans to change it, or is it a feature and not a bug? This is not a bug. Why would it be a bug? Like that's the whole point of Avenger and Blind Hunt. It's to show an enemy combatant. Yeah, what a weird, pointless question. Can aircraft with mixed propulsion be added? Is the game engine able to support and calculate the power and thrust of two different engines in one aircraft? For example, the Mikoyan Gurevich I-250, sometimes called the Samolet N, Consolidated Vultee XP-81, sometimes marked as the ZXF-81, and the Curtiss XF-15C, and the Ryan FR Fireball. The answer is yes, some of these aircraft can be added. The question of creating a mixed power plant is not unsolvable for the game. So it is possible to put these in game, and we're basically talking about stuff like Motorjets, right? Or at least that seems to be the idea that's coming out of this. So for me, that's cool. You know, it would be nice to add these mixed propulsioned aircraft at the end of the day, and they were at least a part of military history, which is kind of forgotten about since they lost they lost the manufacturing war when it came to turbojets. So yeah, I think adding stuff like Motorjets would be interesting. Giving an example of one, if you don't know what the I-250 is, this is the I-250. It was a prototype made by the Soviets, basically post-World War II. It had 3 20mm on it, or at least it was supposed to have. They made around about 12 of them, and it was powered by the VRDK air reaction compressor jet. It was a motorjet which had the Klimov VK107 V12 in it, and as you can see, it's a hell of a chunky boy. Now, if you don't know what a motorjet is, this is a general diagram of it, and this is, how it is explained. So at the heart of the motorjet is an ordinary piston engine, hence the term motor. But instead of, or sometimes as well as, driving a propeller, it drives a compressor. The compressed air is channeled into a combustion chamber where fuel is injected and ignited. The high temperatures generated by the combustion cause the gases in the chamber to expand and escape at high velocity from the exhaust, creating a thermal reactive force that provides useful thrust. So you can understand where the idea of the motorjet comes from. Basically, you have a power plant here, feeds into a compressor, feeds into this area, fired out the back, giving you propulsion. Simple as that. Obviously, this idea did take off in some ways, as you can see, with machines like this, the I-250. It was at least tried, but the general way that we went with military vehicles, at least, was away from this idea, because this idea was just less inefficient than other ones at the time. It would be nice to see them represented in War Thunder, though. War Thunder is great at taking ideas that existed in real life and bringing them to the game in a competitive way when they wouldn't have been as competitive in real life. The Soviets also, with the I-250, had real issues getting the engine properly working. I believe reading they were only able to get it fully functioning for about 1.5 minutes at full capacity, which is just not good when you're trying to create an engine. The next question is Japanese 12.7mm HO-103 machine gun ammo. Several bug reports have already been submitted, but it differs from history. The APT fused HEI is the default according to IJAAF's 1942 instruction. Is the ammo belt based on history, or has it been determined for game balance? Do the developers know about Japanese fuseless HEI called Special Incendiary? The answer is not all belts are created equal. Not all belts are historical, especially with respect to default belts. Yes, in the sets of advanced belts, some of the fillings really repeat the ones actually used at one time or another, but not all. And yes, we know about the Japanese 12.7mm explosive bullets without a fuse, but in such a caliber, all high explosive ammunition will have a similar striking effect, especially when we speak of lighter 12.7mm Radeon machine guns. Therefore, we did not make a separate Japanese specific bullet. Within the game settings, the difference will be invisible to the player. Fair enough. So they're basically saying that if they implemented it, it would have a slightly different name, but the effect would be the same, so it would be kind of pointless. They've said many times in the past that they use ammunition as a balancing factor, whether it's including specific types of ammunition or changing specific belts to match other stuff, so therefore I'm not surprised that this tradition is brought over to the Japanese, since every other area of the game has been experiencing this as well. The next question is, Germany had their own unique versions of the Fiat G.91, like the G.91 R3 with 30mm cannons. Now that rank 5 premiums are being added, is this aircraft under construction to be added in the future? It would be great to see. The answer is yes, we have plans for this German aircraft. That's what we need, more G.91s. The G.91 has been one of the best vehicles in the game for an incredibly long time, and even when it was first added to the game, in the version that it was, the two versions that were added in the Italian tech tree, they were incredibly good. Up to 80% win rates on them because they complemented the Canada Air Sabre. We're having a similar situation now with the G91YS, so why not just add in another one? The G91R3, the main difference between it and the other Italian variants that you see, the single engine ones, is the fact that it has 30mm DEFAs on it. I believe it has 2 on it, so easily enough firepower to do a lot of damage. But yeah, I don't see why you wouldn't add this to the German tech tree. I'd prefer it not to be a premium. I think a standard tech tree version would be fine, but it's just the G91s are really good. Like, it's as simple as that. I don't know how else to put it. So adding more means that they're going to be good as well. The next question. Many of the air-to-air missiles added in Update 1.85 were intended to be used against bombers. They are not as effective or useful in fights against fighter aircraft, so aircraft like the Javelin, that were dedicated all-weather bomber interceptors, can't really be used like they were supposed to be. You previously talked about plans for more advanced CAS aircraft. However, has there been any further consideration or plans for Rank 6 bombers like the Vulcan, Victor, Valiant, Tu-16, and early B-52, Tu-95? These would be really interesting machines to see in War Thunder. When we talked about more advanced attack aircraft, we did not mean heavy strategic bombers, but subsonic attack planes or fighter bombers. Aircraft such as the B-52 are still very special purpose. So what they're talking about here is stuff like the A-10 Warthog and the Su-25 or the Su-25T. These machines I definitely think we're going to see in War Thunder. What I'm worried about is the laser-guided munitions and how they're going to work in War Thunder. Because if you've ever played DCS, or if you've ever looked at combat reports from the A-10 Warthog using the Maverick missiles, yeah, it's not pretty for whatever is on the ground. So therefore, I am worried for CAS in general. Now, a lot of people say, well, we've got the Tunguska. Yeah, well, what if you're not facing Soviets? Or what if you add in the Su-25, a Soviet machine, with its massive missiles? What's going to happen then? So, yeah, I'm sure they're having these discussions. I want to see how they're implemented. And as I've said many times, one thing that I'm really surprised by is that we haven't had a bomb change. What I mean by that is an update on the bomb mechanics, how they actually work in game. And I think if we get, these new missiles or these new armaments on these aircraft, on stuff like the Sukhoi, we will definitely see a change in the way that bomb physics work. Otherwise, we're in for a hell of a time. I'll just say that. With these if you ever get high altitude strategic bombers as well, going to be absolutely crazy. Sorry. I've had a very long week. Let's just put it like that. So, with work, it's been incredibly long. But yeah, I would personally like to see these bombers in game. I don't think they really fit, but there is something wonderful about seeing them in War Thunder. Seeing the Vulcan use a mission, it is absolutely wonderful. And I hope that it gives, Gaijin impetus to be able to put them in the game. The question is whether people will use them or not, and I think the answer to that will probably be no, unless we're talking about a realistic ground experience, or they're grinding machines. I've the feeling that the gunners on the bombers seem to have got worse. They almost don't notice approaching aircraft. Don't you think appearance of new aircraft and missiles, the gunners should get upgraded keen vision? The answer, there haven't been any specific changes to the gunners, so therefore maybe the engagement distance has just increased for the majority of people. What I would say though, in regards to the gunners though, you should always take control of your gunners. You should never let the automatic gunners dictate what you do, because they are useless completely, unless you have them fully stacked out, but even then, it's still better to directly control them. Now onto helicopters. The Mi-4V is a really unpopular helicopter. It's not much fun to use even when upgraded. Are you planning any additional starter helicopters to help alleviate this? The Mi-4 is a reserve helicopter. It performs the role of the initial helicopter and is fully consistent with its task. It is not planned to change the reserve helicopter in the helicopter tree of the USSR. I personally think the Mi-4 is fine. When it's fully upgraded, it has a decent amount of ATGMs, which seem to be the main point of using the machine. If we're talking about from a helicopter event point of view, their own game mode, it still has good ordnance. It definitely struggles a little bit in the maneuverability department, but I think as a starter one, it's completely fine. Like if we compare it to the starter German one, which struggles when it comes to its survivability, and also its ATGMs not being very good. When we compare it to the American one, obviously the American one is better at killing helicopters, but it's worse at killing ground targets. And then on top of this as well, the French one is, well, it's an American one. So, but that's kind of a jack of all trades. So the Mi-4 I think is fine, where it is. I don't think it needs to be replaced. I don't think, there should be any additional ones. And to be honest, my opinion on helicopters right now is I just want every nation to get a tree to get rid of that imbalance of mechanics. So as a general rule, once we get all of the tech trees, then we can add other stuff, then we can add the interesting stuff to the pre-existing trees. But let's just get the other tech trees done first and get rid of that imbalance that we have. Helicopter battles could really benefit from more AI. Do you have plans for escort missions where you perhaps have to aid cargo and troop transports like the CH-47 Chinook or Mi-26? The answer is maybe in the future. Wonderful. I think the testing grounds for helicopter battles and enduring confrontation is a wonderful place. Hopefully, in the future, it will be used more as a place to, as I said, test stuff, and I'm sure it will. So, yeah, that would be great, to see more AI running around. I've been fiddling around with some user missions and making a few and testing out AI, and it seems to have at least got better compared to about 5 years ago, but it's still not on a great level. Do you foresee helicopters of nations not currently in game ever being added to major nations as premiums, such as the Naval, Ruvalk, South Africa, or the T-129 ATAC from Turkey? Yes, such options are possible. Well, I think that's pretty much obvious that if you look at, when it comes to ground or air, you have other nations' vehicles as premiums, and other tech trees. I just wish that they stayed away from the idea of captured vehicles, which it seems like they've done. I can't remember the last time a captured vehicle was added to the game, which is wonderful stuff. Now on to the naval portion. I'm definitely looking forward to the naval stuff, especially for the French, because I've been doing a lot of research into the French, and I have no idea how the tree's going to look. It's going to be hilarious. So the the first question is there any news on mine-laying vehicles? We were shown the VS-8 during a test event, but nothing since then. The answer is yes. We have not forgotten or cancelled mine weapons, just adding it to ships and vessels that could carry them takes some time. Our current plans are to make mines one of the types of exchangeable weapons instead of depth charges, for example, for those ships that could use mines. Wonderful stuff. We can get rid of the useless depth charges and we can add something that is useful. So that is a really positive change. Hopefully that brings along other vehicles as well, such as the VS8 coming back to the game. It's still sat there in the game files. You know, you can still play it in a user mission if you want to. But it's just nice to see that they are pushing forward with that idea and expanding it to a lot of vehicles. The German S-boats are very nice, but are there plans to add more variants, such as the S7, S10 or S13 class? Yes, we do not exclude the possibility of these vessels, but these will all be low-level boats, because the armament there is rather weak for a boat's displacement. So basically these are all going to be rank 1 or 2 vehicles. I'm fine with that because that's the part of Naval I really enjoy. I like the rank 1 and rank 2 stuff. The rank 3 and rank 4 stuff definitely loses me, let's say. But I'm just personally happy that, you know, we're going to get more boats. If you want a cool website as well, Nathan actually pointed this out to me, sent me this in a link, and I definitely will do a video looking over this stuff. But it's called s-boot.net, and it's all about, obviously, the S-boots, and it has all the different types of S-boot that there is, what their configurations are, with some diagrams and what to look out for to try and work out which one is which. So there are a ton of vehicles here that you could add, you know, to the it's even got the Russian boat, the TKA-45 and the 47. So there's even some more of them you could add, and some of the British ones as well. So yeah, this website's great. It's kind of sad that they've had to take out the swastika though. But yeah, hopefully we will see more of these machines. I'm sure we will, you know, over time. The next question is, in the case of France, if a full naval tree is not possible soon after Japan and Italy, is it possible we may see a few premium ships soon, like what happened with Italian ground forces? P-40 and M26 were added a year before the tree to give players something to use. The answer is too early to talk about it. I personally didn't like the addition of the P-40 and the M26 way before the Italian tree, just because of the fact that there was no use to using them. There was absolutely no use to using them, and also one of them was just a copy-paste American vehicle. So for me, I would much prefer premiums coming out when a tech tree comes out, instead of some form of weird way to just sell premiums. With the French as well, there's also the fact that when we look at like battle boats, which is like the majority of rank 1 and rank 2 when it comes to nations, the French really struggle. They really, really struggle. If you have a look at some torpedo boats that France made, they made some like prototypes from like 1880 to 1900, and then just that was it. They were just done with the idea. So it's going to be really interesting to see what the rank 1 and rank 2 of French naval looks like. I feel like it's just going to be great to see all of the weird and wonderful stuff. I'll probably make a video on those vehicles, just because there's a cracker of a website out there which goes through them all. And then the last 2 questions, the other stuff. The hit camera is very nice, but it breaks your smoke mechanics, showing the enemy behind the smoke with the help of machine gun fire. Will you be working on this? The answer is we've discussed this issue with our team several times, but did not find a solution that satisfied us more than the current one. It has its pros and cons. I don't think it's that big of an issue. It doesn't happen that often. I think there's more of a discussion that has to be had about the kill cam even existing in the first place, because of the fact that, you know, you can generally shoot a target from a nice position, and then they either come back in an aircraft or they come back in another vehicle, and they know exactly where you are, so if you don't move, you're going to die. Now, that could be an issue with experience, or that could be an issue with, you know, just how the game is, but it is something to think about much more importantly than this the smoke mechanic idea, which is broken by the kill cam. The last one is, do you want to add premium boats to the War Bonds store? They're already there. Check out War Bonds for May. So I believe this got released a little bit after this got released a little bit after the Q&A, and yeah, look, they've added in some boats, which is really awesome. That is absolutely wonderful. They've also got the decal as well. So now you have the opportunities to get ground forces, air forces, and naval stuff instead of just ground forces and air forces. Maybe one day we'll have helicopters, but for now, at least that's not, the full case. What I'm going to do is I'll make a separate video looking into this stuff. Well, I might do, I'm not sure. I mean, the T-34 5743 is, I wish it was down 0.3 of a BR. The Elco 80-foot PT556 is a great machine. It's something that I really enjoy. Decent amount of guns and also the torpedoes on it. Being an arcade naval player, it's a hell of a lot of fun. But yeah, I might make a separate video on it, and if I don't, well, it's there now. Anyway, that is all of the questions covered. As you can see, it's quite a long Q&A, and I'm very happy that it is a long Q&A. It's great going through, discussing it, and, agreeing or disagreeing with the answers given. And hopefully it'll give you a little bit of an insight into what is coming and what in the future. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank B. Young, Blackie, Daniel Stanton, Dyslexic Child, Martinez, Matati, Moxie, Nito, Nick Graham, Alobralo, and Super Cacti for supporting me on Patreon.